By the time George Harrison departed the Beatles, he didn't have much nice to say about all that. In his diary on January 10, 1969, the guitarist wrote unceremoniously, "Got up, went to Twickenham, rehearsed until lunchtime, left the Beatles." Obviously, he came back, or at least came back so they could at least finish their final records and get things all wrapped up officially. But by that point, Harrison had simply had enough of feeling underappreciated. It wasn't just a passing frustration either. It had been building quietly over the years, lingering beneath the surface, while the band's public image remained one of unity and effortless collaboration. Bob Dylan explained it best when he said, "George got stuck with being the Beatle that had to fight to get songs on records because of Lennon and McCartney." Dylan added, "Well, who wouldn't get stuck? If George had had his own group and was writing his own songs back then, he'd have been probably just as big as anybody." His words carried weight, not just because of his status, but because he understood the songwriting hierarchy that existed within the band, a structure that often left Harrison's growing catalog waiting in the shadows. That was really the crux of it. By the end of their time together, Harrison felt he was constantly battling John Lennon and Paul McCartney just to get them to pay attention to his songs. What made it more frustrating was that his songwriting had evolved dramatically by the late 1960s. Tracks like While My Guitar Gently Weeps and Something proved he was no longer the junior partner. He was a fully formed creative force. That tension is visible in the footage from the making of Let It Be, where subtle disagreements and moments of silence spoke volumes. But it is also clear in the long list of great songs the Beatles passed on that later found a home in his solo work, songs that would eventually define his identity outside the band. However, despite the tension, and despite praise between the four becoming rarer, there were still moments when Harrison and Lennon found common ground. Even as their relationship grew frostier, the two guitarists could occasionally connect through the music, remembering why they were friends and why they admired each other beneath it all. These flashes of connection were often brief, but they carried a sense of authenticity that words alone could no longer express. For Harrison, one of those clear moments came during the making of the band's The White Album. This was arguably the time when everything started speeding towards an inevitable and disastrous end as the relationships began to get strained. Long studio hours, creative differences, and personal tensions all contributed to an atmosphere that felt increasingly fragile. But then, Lennon would come into the studio and, in an instant, remind everyone of his raw musical instinct. John played a brilliant solo on Honey Pie, Harrison reflected to Guitar Player in the 1980s. It's only a brief moment in the track, which is mostly a McCartney piano piece with an old-school swing feel rooted in pre-rock traditions. The song itself is almost a pastiche of 1920s and 1930s music, showing McCartney's love for vintage styles. But in the middle, John Lennon takes the spotlight, and to Harrison, it stood out in a way that few other moments did during those tense sessions. There was something effortless about it, something that cut through the complexity of their interpersonal struggles. "Sounded like Django Reinhardt or something," he said of the musical moment, referencing the legendary Belgian jazz guitarist, adding, "sounded like a little jazz solo." That comparison wasn't casual. Reinhardt was known for his fluid phrasing, unconventional technique, and ability to make the guitar sing in a way that felt both spontaneous and deeply expressive. For Harrison to invoke his name meant Lennon had tapped into something instinctive, something beyond technical precision. It was one of those moments where it all fell back into place. For a brief time, the tensions, the frustrations, and the unspoken resentments faded into the background. What remained was the music, the very thing that had brought them together in the first place. It was a reminder of their love for one another's work, but also of the world of mutual references and influences they'd been building together since their youth, pulling on a niche name and making it work in this shared creative realm they'd made together. From rock and roll to Indian music to jazz, their influences were vast, and moments like this showed how naturally they could channel them. Though things were getting tough between them, it was instances like this, when the music was just so good, that kept them trying to make it work, even if only subconsciously. These fleeting flashes of brilliance served as quiet reassurances that beneath the disagreements, the chemistry was still there. In the end, it wasn't just about the conflicts or the breakup, it was about these small, almost hidden moments of connection, moments where artistry spoke louder than ego, and where, even for a few seconds, everything felt exactly as it should.